Okay, so thinking about where you are with reading and writing stuff, I just kind of want to, if you have a question as I'm talking, go ahead and raise your hand. I'm going to turn off the, Alexis! I missed Alexis. Okay, in my attendance. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the chat, and if you have a question, just click the hand raise button so that I know that you have a question about what I'm saying. Okay, so I'm going to just show you guys our two different calendars to try to help you kind of figure out where you should be. I know it's harder to kind of keep track of things on your own and not get as much kind of guidance each day from me out loud like a real class. So I know that can be a little bit harder. So I just kind of want to show through what I've been hoping you've been doing over the past couple weeks with very short little interjections from me. Okay, so looking at our Shark Tank calendar. Okay, so this is for writing. This is your business project. This day we did together. We did a little free writing. You imagined kind of what business you might be interested in. And I think most of you have considered what sort of business you might want to own. So if you had your own business, what would it be? And it can be anything. So any type of business. You just have to offer a service or a product. So it could be a restaurant, it could be a hotel, it could be a cruise line, it could be a beauty store, it could be a pet shop, it could be, a sports store or a summer camp or anything. Okay, so all of those totally valid. And then talked about ethos, pathos, and logos. We did that worksheet all together where we watched those few different episodes of Shark Tank in the afternoon that day, and then we talked about how those pitches showed ethos, pathos, and logos. I helped in small groups people create a folder, and so you may not have put all those required Google Docs in there yet, but hopefully you kind of have you have that folder and it's shared with me and shared with everyone in your group. I think most people have done that. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people have. This what is functional format stuff, I just kind of talked about that. Don't worry about that too much. There was a paper that you had to do and some people asked me about it and were confused. Don't worry about the paper too much. I just want you to know that functional format is a type of nonfiction that has a purpose in the real world, like a website, a brochure, a recipe. Those are all examples of functional format. So it's not just to like learn something. It often has an element of like I'm using this for a purpose, to buy something, to make something, directions, that kind of stuff. They're all functional format. Okay, so they serve a particular function. And then hopefully you watched my video on targeting an audience, deciding like who is your intended audience. Cannot be everyone. Everyone is not your intended audience. So there's always going to be some people from every sort of category that do everything, but you want to think about different groups. So the example that I gave in that video was like my parents were planning to go on a river cruise, and they looked at a bunch of different packages for different people. And one of them was like super active with all of this bike riding, and they covered a lot of ground, did a whole bunch of like hiking and exercising, and it was really intense, which my parents probably would have been into when they were like my age, and not so much anymore. And then there was another one that like drove you everywhere and was also had like unlimited alcohol, like it was like and unlimited food. Like it was way more of a relaxing version, and they picked the one that was kind of in between that, where they were all walking tours every day, but the walking tours were really short and guided, and just had unlimited food. So there were different packages for different types of people. And so like in kind of different age groups. So just be thinking about who are you targeting with your business. And then a bunch of you started this agreement between your work members, and I gave you a couple of examples that you could look at. Even if you're working by yourself, I want you to kind of make a work plan, like this is all the stuff you have to do. I already posted this business name and audience form, and many of you already filled that out because that was one of the things that I said to do last week. Tomorrow I'll talk more about like how to create your website if you haven't already, or how to make a brochure if you're going to do a brochure on paper or a flyer on paper. That's fine too. You do not have to use a computer to do this project. You can do all of this on paper. You can do all your planning on paper. You can even do like a pretend website on paper, or you can make a brochure on paper or a flyer. Okay, any questions about writing before I move on? Anybody have any questions about writing? Just raise your hand if you do. Sterling? Yeah.
Question. Can you in the chat real quickly, because I need to ask Emma a quick question about like what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Alexis? You still have a question? Alexis, do you still have a question? Do you want to speak or no? I'm going to teach that tomorrow. Not today. No Kahoot today. Yeah, you have math today. Okay, so any more questions about writing stuff? Sterling, do you have another question? Okay. So then thinking about reading. So let me go ahead and walk through where we might be with reading. Okay, so we did this together. I shared with you some of the read aloud choices. We read aloud Patrol, and then this stuff you've basically been doing on your own in the slideshow. So you've been working, hopefully, on some of these slides. And remember, I'd rather you do just some of them really well as opposed to just write a couple words on each slide. So I would rather you do a slide really well and take your time with it and do what you can than kind of just try to write random things on lots of slides. Okay, so this filling in the backstory one, a lot of you were able to do this. Timelines, this is ongoing, so you're probably not done with this yet because you haven't finished your books yet. And then how do characters respond to trouble? So what do those moments of trouble reveal about the protagonist? If you've been reading your book for the past week, then your character has probably hit some sort of trouble. If you're listening to my read aloud of A Night Divided, then we know that Goethe has definitely run into some trouble, the main character. And then this idea of collision of the internal traits with the external world. So you could use any of these sentence starters to just get yourself thinking about things. This is kind of like a free writing page. And then today we're going to talk about perspectives of minor characters. That's fine, Sterling. Okay, so can you guys click the agree button if you listen to any of my book for A Night Divided? I just kind of want to know how many people have listened to part of it. That's okay, Sterling. Okay, so some of you have, and some of you haven't. That's okay. So for this book, A Night Divided, so this is all about the Berlin Wall. That's like the backstory of this book. And just for those of you that haven't heard my book talk on it and Flipgrid, I'll just read the little opening again to help you think about it. So with the sudden rise of the Berlin Wall, 12-year-old Goethe finds her family divided overnight. She, her mother, and her brother Fritz live on the eastern side, controlled by the Soviets. Her father and middle brother, who had gone west in search of work, are unable to return home. Goethe knows it is dangerous to watch the wall, to think forbidden thoughts of freedom, yet she can't help herself. She sees the East German soldiers with their guns trained on their own citizens, watching for any sign of escape. Goethe, her family, her neighbors, and friends are prisoners in their own city. But one day, Goethe spots her father on the viewing platform on the western side of the wall, pantomiming a peculiar dance. She concludes that her father wants Goethe and Fritz to tunnel beneath the wall out of East Berlin. However, if they are caught, the consequences will be deadly. No one can be trusted. Will Goethe and her family find their way to freedom? And so, today, like I said, our focus is attending to the perspectives of minor characters. So there might be a little glare on my whiteboard, but I'll be talking through what I write. Okay. So today I want to teach you that minor characters are in the book for a reason. They, like the main character, help to carry the big messages or big ideas in the story. One way to improve your interpretation of a story is to try to reread and understand that point of view a little bit better. So the perspective of a minor character, and then revise your interpretation to include what you learn. So I'm going to think about, for those of you who have read it, you can probably think of some of the minor characters in this story. Like her friend Anna is a pretty, main character, but not one of the most main characters. So you could think about writing about Anna. But I'm going to focus on a couple of snippets of Herr Kraus. So Herr Kraus is their neighbor, and he is kind of is really invested in freedom. He's invested in the whole idea that East Berlin shouldn't be blocking people from getting out. And the beginning of the book starts before the wall has gone up. And so I'm going to just read aloud a couple of pieces that we get about Eyre Crouse. So we have just in chapter 2, when her father goes and opens the door. So this time, however, my father's face widened into a smile, and in a welcoming voice he said, "Eyre Crouse!" Then he pulled the older man into our apartment with a warm embrace. "Have you eaten supper, my friend?" "Thank you, but I can't stay." Eyre Crouse lived next door with his invalid wife. He was a bit odd, collecting scraps of anything that wasn't nailed down and stuffing them wherever the Stasi might not look. And the Stasi are the secret police. He and my father had known each other for as long as I could remember, and had then been at the uprising together. Mama once told me he definitely should have been arrested for that, and that we were not wise to associate with him. Okay, so that's just a little introduction into Eyre Crouse. And then we hear from him later too. So Goethe hears through the wall of her apartment. She hears Eyre Crouse cry out for help. Okay, so she says, "I just finished buckling up my shoes when I heard a scuffle going on in Eyre Crouse's apartment next door. He wasn't alone. Something was wrong. Through the thin walls of our apartments, I heard him cry out for help, and I darted into the hallway. I wasn't exactly sure what I should do, but there were always people down on the street. Perhaps I could run downstairs and bring someone back to help him. He cried out again, and then something crashed against the door. 'Hold on,' I yelled. 'I'll get the police.' His door opened, and Eyre Crouse collapsed onto the floor in the hallway. His head was bleeding, and he was groaning. 2 men followed him through the doorway and grabbed him by the shoulders. 'We are the police,' one of them snarled at me. 'Go back inside.' No, they were Stasi. Their greenish-gray uniforms and the square and compass emblem on their hats were dead giveaways to their identity. The question was why they had come for our neighbor. What has he done? The question fell from my mouth before I could think better of it. Surely they had made a mistake. Eyre Crouse wouldn't swat a fly without feeling guilt, but they began dragging him away without answering. 2 more Stasi left his apartment next. The smaller of them pushed past me to clear the way for his companion, who was carrying an armful of books, papers, and what appeared to be rubber stamps. It was a child's play set. I used to have one just like it, in fact, so I couldn't think of any reason Eyre Crouse should have it, or why the Stasi would be interested if he did, unless it wasn't being used for play. A gust of wind came from my open apartment door and blew into the hallway. I caught a few papers from the officer's hand and scattered them on the ground. Without thinking, I reached down to help pick them up. Sure enough, the printing on them was stamped with a message that looked as it had been hand-carved into the stamp. If I cannot speak what I think, then it's a crime to just be me. So that's what Despite its promise of a free press, the state controlled all printing machines and wrote the stories for the newspapers to publish. No citizen was allowed to write his ideas if they differed from the state message, and certainly it was against the law to distribute those writings. And so skipping ahead, she finds the paper, and then she says, in effect, Eyre Crouse's life was already over. "Give me that paper," the shorter officer ordered me. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. "Let her read it," Eyre Crouse shouted from the end of the hallway. "Why is the GDR so afraid of letting its people think?" But the officer shoved me against a wall, and in the moment when our eyes met, I whispered, "I know you." He was a friend of Fritz's, so Fritz is her brother, or used to be years ago. When I was very young, he used to ride me around on his back like a pony. Did he remember that? Didn't he know me too? So why then does the author include this little sideline story about Eyre Crouse and being involved in the uprising with her father and then getting arrested by the Stasi? So you can type in the chat, or if anybody wants to share out loud what they're thinking, even if it's not directly answering my question, what are you thinking about aircrafts? Then go ahead and raise your hand to talk, or you can type. No one has any thoughts? Make a plan before the wall is built. Yeah, so he did have, he was kind of printing this after the wall because I skipped a chunk. So he had been doing, yeah, he had been making plans before. Yeah, so at the first part I read, no, it's fine. The first part I read was before the wall went up. That's a good thing to clarify. The first part I read where he went over next door to see father, and then now, after he got, okay? So I want you to think about what he said. He wrote down, this is what he got in trouble for. He wrote down, if I cannot speak what I think, then it's a crime just to be me. Sterling, you can share if you want to. Did you want to say something, Sterling? Or no? I can't really hear you, Sterling. I'm not sure if other people can or not.
Yeah, my mic was doing something.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I think he's saying, like, if he doesn't have the right to speak his mind, he's not really like a person, because each person has their own voice and has their own mind. You can't stop someone from thinking something. Like,
Yeah.
you can't stop them from saying it, but they can stop themselves. But if it's something that is like right, they should be able to say it. That's what I'm like, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to read one more snippet about Air Kraus. Okay, so before he just got arrested by the Stasi, okay, and he gets taken away. And then he gets brought back of some weeks later. And so this is when Goethe's in bed one night. When I heard the sounds in the apartment next door, I easily woke up. Someone was crying in the neighboring apartment, but not just anyone. It was Herr Kraus. I couldn't understand that at first. Herr Kraus was a strong man who'd come through 2 world wars and hunger and the death of his wife. I wouldn't have thought anything could affect him so greatly now. Maybe even though he had been released from his arrest, the Stasi had done something that was still torturing him. So this is a very small snippet, but why is the author including this idea that, she wakes up in the middle of the night to hear her neighbor crying through the walls? You can either share what you think or you can raise your hand. Okay, Sterling?
I think he's like, the author is like including that because they're showing the emotion from him and what she thinks of him, but like what he's actually going through, and like no one can really like know if like you think they're strong, but actually I wouldn't say they're weak, but like it's hard on them maybe. So
Yeah. Yeah, and Charles, they kind of like took some of his plans and his ideas, his writing, the things that he'd been trying to work towards, and it does build some background for us, Lucy, to think about like what is the Stasi like. So these little details about Herr Kraus do show how like powerful the Stasi is. They show kind of like the pain of the torture. So you can infer that he's been taken by the Stasi and is really maybe has been tortured by them. And you also learn the idea that like ideas are bad in East Germany. So there's lots of little bits and pieces that I get out of reading this. So all of these little details are reasons why Herr Kraus is involved in the story. So on this page that you have in your reading notebook, you probably want to think about, you could use the example of Herr Kraus from A Night Divided, or you could use the example of Anna, because Anna is someone who really tries to follow the rules, which is different from Goethe. And then, or you could choose anything from your own book, or you could even think about Patrol. Last time we, when I read aloud, we talked about why are the babies and the old women and the old men included? Why are they included in the story? Okay, so you could also do this slide for Patrol as well. Okay, math people, you can open up your email. If you didn't already copy and paste that link into your document, you might want to, and you can follow that link and go to Mrs. Sahai's math class. Just come back here and let me know if there was a problem, but you guys can go. And I went a couple minutes over. Hopefully she doesn't get upset. Okay. So you guys, we are going to, does anyone have any questions about reading before we move on? I can talk to them later too. Okay. What books can you read again, Charles? Any historical fiction book. So there's a whole bunch of options. So the ones I shared were like Blood on the River is a good book. A Long Walk to Water, Fever 1793, Refugee, or Allies, or Grenade. Yeah, choose a book from your house. Choose a book you already have, or you can listen to me read A Night Divided. Any historical fiction stuff. I don't know that book, Charles, but as long as it's historical fiction, I'm happy. Okay, so we are going to, sounds great, Charles. So we're going to do a quick little which one doesn't belong. So I think you guys know how that works. So I'm gonna project it, and then I'm going to give you a poll to share which one you think. And then you can share. That sounds good, Sterling. Okay. Okay, so you guys see the which one doesn't belong? And I'm going to give you a poll. I'm going to talk about independent work after this, yeah. Okay, so which one do you think doesn't belong? Be ready to defend your answer. Well, pick one for now, Charles. Pick whichever one you think you can talk about. Remember, with which one doesn't belong, there's almost always a reason why every single one of them doesn't belong. So there's no wrong answer as long as you're thinking. So a couple people still need to answer. Okay, good. At least we have somebody who thinks about each of the different ones. Good. So we should have a good discussion for a second. Okay, I'm going to start with Hannah. Can you explain what why you chose the upper left?
Should I explain, like, now?
Yeah.
Okay, I chose that because it's the only one that wasn't, like, that the minutes wasn't 45. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Let's see. Dan, can you share why you chose the upper right?
So I picked the upper right because there's no minute smaller, like, I don't know what to call them, but like the minutes
Yeah, the
that
little
aren't by fives, yeah, like the little lines.
Good. Okay. Charles, can you share why you chose the bottom right?
Every single one except the bottom right has the hour hand at like 4, but all of them have it at 1.
Good. Okay, and then a bunch of people chose the bottom left. If anyone is willing to share that, can you raise your hand? Okay, Sterling. I can't hear you, Sterling. Your mic is not working. Okay. I pick
It's working.
Finn. Thank you.
It's working now. Oh, it's working now.
She can go first.
It's okay. Go ahead, Finn. We already, no offense, Sterling. We already heard from you today. So let's hear from Finn.
I chose the bottom left because one, there are no numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Two, there's no bold rim around the edge.
Okay. Yeah, two of them do have that bolded ring. Okay. So good. So this was just a fun little reminder. So I know this is about time, right? So we don't, that's not really a 6th grade skill, but it was just sort of different. Yes, Sterling, you can add another thing.
Also, the bottom left doesn't have a dot in the middle where it connects the minute and the hour hand. Oh wait, no, the top right one.
Top right one doesn't either, but that's a good thing to notice too. Yeah, that's another thing to notice. Good. Okay, there's one thing, I don't think anybody said one other thing that I'm noticing about the upper left. Connor, you'd also chosen that. I don't know if you saw something else. Or Charles, do you want to share?
They don't have like the minute marks.
The upper right doesn't have minute marks. We shared that. There's something else that I noticed about the upper left that is different. That is different from the others. Finn, what do you think? Want to share? Does anybody else see what I see? Joshua?
Well, so the minute hand is pointing to the number 3, when all the other minute hands on the other clocks are pointing to the number 9.
Yeah, I think that Hannah shared that before, but there's another thing that I'm noticing too. Okay, Sterling?
I don't know if this is just because you're sharing your screen, but I see like a little magnifying glass.
Yes, the magnifying glass is not what I'm noticing, no,
Yeah.
but that's funny. Yeah. Okay. I want you to look at where the hour hand is pointing in the upper left compared to the others. All right, what do you think, Finn?
I noticed that the hour and minute hand of the top left is in a acute angle.
Yeah, it is. It creates an acute angle. And also that hour hand is pointing directly at a number where it looks to me like all the other ones, the hour hand is pointing between 2 hours and not directly at a number. So I see those two things. And yeah, so you see that acute angle of the time is a little bit different. All the others have an obtuse angle. Okay. All right, I wonder if I wanted to do one more thing, and I think that we should still have time. This should only take literally 1 minute. So we're going to do a quick little estimation activity. If you can just jot down, grab a pencil or a pen and paper, or just a spot on your computer or whatever, or you can even type your, actually, yeah, why don't you type it into the chat? Why don't you type your estimation into the chat? That would be good. And we're going to look at an estimation of how many, you know, those little cheese balls that are like crunchy cheese snacks? We're going to make an estimate of how many can fit on a large plate. So I'm going to switch my screen to that one. Okay, and so here's the large plate. And I want you to make an estimate of how many cheese balls can fit all the edges of the large plate. And maybe you want to make an estimate of like what's too low, what's too high, and what do you think? So I'm going to make this big so you guys can see. So go ahead and make an estimate, and you could say like between these two numbers. So it's not going to be between 5 and 10, but I could say between 5 and 10. So between what and what? Maybe you want to make some kind of statement like that. To fill up the whole plate. So you're trying to fill up the whole plate. So great, Dan. That's good. Between 74 and 101. So you can make any estimate like that. So whatever kind of, and if you want to try to give me just one number, that's fine too. The prices. Okay, so we're gonna watch this and we're gonna watch it happen. I think you'll be surprised. Okay, so look kind of where it is right now. That's where it is, where it's mostly filling up the center. If you want to change your guess, go ahead and change your guess in the chat now. You can change your guess. Or if you want to be more specific or something, you can. Okay, so let's see. That's a lot, huh? 156. And so when I did this, my estimate was much closer to where I paused it, of being a little bit smaller. So just within that little bit, it's so much more than I thought it would be, just from where I paused it to reaching that outer edge, right? Really crazy. So hopefully you liked that. We might do some more of those in more detail. That was just sort of a little taster of what that looks like. But we might talk more about how do we get those estimates later. So really interesting. I was way off when I did that. I think it's interesting, Charles, to think about. We'll look at it more. We'll look at it more tomorrow. I'll explain. Okay. We don't have time today. All right. So between now and so just a quick announcement, we will be doing some science and social studies week. So tomorrow and Thursday, you'll see Mr. Garahan for part of the time. Today, I can help people get set up with their website and also help you with any of those math quizzes that you have not finished. So you don't have to come at 1. If you have any questions, you can come at 1. Any questions about any work. But you don't have to come. If you have questions about math, or if you have questions about setting up your website and actually starting that process, then I can help you at that time. And so for independent work today, I want you to keep reading, listening to the Flipgrid Read Aloud for A Night Divided. You can work on slides all the way through 1 through 15 in your reading notebook. This thing that we did today with the example of Air Krauss is slide 15 in your reading notebook. You can get started on your website or your brochure. I made a review hyperdoc that has a whole bunch of quizzes. So you'll be doing 3 quizzes a week. Last week we only did 2, and you did one on mixed numbers. So a lot of you haven't done those yet. So the mixed numbers and the one on fraction, decimals, and percent. So I made a math review hyperdoc that has all of those things. You guys can work on any of the worksheets that were mailed in your packet. If you have questions about the science group project, I'm going to talk more about that tomorrow during office hours. But if you have questions and want to get started on it today, you can come to office hours today, or you can stick around for a couple minutes and I can help you then. Okay, so we are all done for today. If you if you have questions that you want to talk to right now, you can. Otherwise, I will see anyone who needs help at 1.